A few weeks ago, I sat down to dinner with my son after a year of silence. Napkins folded like little white flags, the kind of night where you pray words can repair what time tore apart. My phone buzzed under the table. Unknown number. 4 short sentences that cut through me like ice. Get up, walk out now, do not warn Tyler. I stared at the screen while my heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted to break the plate in front of me. Who tells a father to abandon his own kid mid-sentence? Who even knows I'm here? If you've ever gone through something like this, drop a comment. I'm listening. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments section. Okay, deep breath. Let me tell you everything. I'm Franklin Mercer. Most people call me Frank. I run the Mercer Garage Group, small chain of honest shops that pay the bills and keep my hands smelling like solvent no matter how hard I scrub. I live alone in a 1-story place in Northbrook. My wife, Marianne, passed 3 years ago, and loneliness turned my kitchen into a museum of routines. 1 plate, 1 mug, 1 fork. I keep her old brass pocket watch by the sink. I wind it every night, not because it needs it, but because I need to feel time obey me for once. Tyler and I hadn't spoken since I refused to invest in a can't-miss venture. I told him hard work beats shortcuts. He told me I still live in the Stone Age. Doors slammed, months flipped away. It's funny, when you're estranged, everything becomes a symbol. An empty chair at Sunday breakfast, a voicemail you don't play, a picture you leave face down because you can't bring yourself to dust it. Then, out of nowhere, Tyler called. His number lit up my phone while I was tightening a belt on a customer's sedan in Harborview. "Dad," he said, voice careful, "can you come to dinner? Alyssa's making that roast you like." I said yes before my pride could answer for me. That night I dressed slower than a man my age needs to. Fresh shirt, jacket that didn't smell like the shop. Marianne's watch slipped into my vest pocket. I drove the old Buick, heater groaning, dashboard cracked, over the state line into Brookfield, New Jersey, where Tyler and Alyssa had bought a place I'd never seen. Their house looked like a magazine cover someone forgot to close. Broad steps, quiet security lights, windows spread wide like they were proud of what they could see. A woman opened the door before I rang. Mid-50s, crisp black dress, small cross at her collarbone. "Welcome, Mr. Mercer," she said with a soft accent. "I'm Elena." Her eyes flicked just once to my vest pocket, then back to my face like she recognized the shape of grief. "Dad," Tyler stepped into the foyer, handsome and polished, hugging me tighter than his words felt. Alyssa followed, perfect hair, perfect smile, the kind of hostess who knows where every light switch lives in the dark. "We're so glad you're here," she said, and I believed it until the second her smile slipped and snapped back into place. The dining room gleamed, mahogany table, pale linens, a chandelier that pretended warmth. They sat me at the head like I'd won something. We made small talk that sounded like a script. Business is steady, the commute's not so bad, the neighborhood is lovely this time of year. The food was good, but my appetite was a coward. Every clink of silverware felt too loud, every laugh felt practiced. I told myself to stop being suspicious. People grow up, they change. Maybe this was the bridge back. Then my phone buzzed. I'd kept it on silent out of respect, but the vibration traveled through the tabletop into my bones. I slid it out under the napkin, holding the screen low enough that the chandelier didn't flash off the glass. Unknown number. 4 lines, each its own command. Get up. Walk out now. Say nothing. Do not warn your son. My throat went dry. I raised my eyes slowly like a deer pretending to be a stump. Tyler was pouring wine, telling a story about a deal that fell through but would come back around. Alyssa laughed in the exact right place. Elena drifted through behind them with a tray of glasses, careful and quiet. For half a second, her gaze slid over my face and paused, like a fingertip touching a bruise no one else could see. What was I supposed to do? Stand up and bolt? Grab Tyler's wrist and drag him to the door? Announce that a ghost in my phone told me to run? I tucked the phone away and forced my mouth into something like a smile. "Dad, are you okay?" Tyler asked. His concern sounded real, and I hated that I doubted it. "Just need a minute," I said, patting my jacket. "His clothes fit tighter than I remember." It earned a laugh. I stood, steady on the outside, rattling on the inside. I walked toward the hallway, counted my steps to keep from counting my fears. In the mirror over the console table, an older man stared back, lines deeper than the last time I'd looked this closely, the watch chain tracing a neat arc from pocket to button like it was holding me together. The powder room door clicked shut behind me. I locked it. I read the message again and tried to hear tone and typed words. "Get up. Walk out now. Do not warn Tyler." Not please. Not trust me. Orders. My pulse drummed against my ears. I checked for a name, an old thread, a previous conversation. Nothing. I turned the faucet on, splashed water on my face, and stared at the sink until the porcelain stopped swimming. Who would send that? Why me? Why now? When I came back to the table, the air felt heavier by a few invisible degrees. Alyssa's hand rested on Tyler's forearm. He didn't seem to notice the way she squeezed once, a tiny squeeze you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. A fresh glass waited by my plate, amber liquid catching the chandelier's glow. "You always loved a good pour," Tyler said, sliding it closer to my hand. "For special nights." "I'll get to it," I said, reaching for my water instead. Alyssa's smile ticked at the edges. Elena set a ramekin on a sideboard and left as quietly as a breath. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the text was a cruel mistake, a wrong number that chose the worst moment it could find. But something in me, the stubborn piece that built a life out of busted bolts and late nights, said no. The room was too perfect. Their voices were too bright. This invitation came too easy after a year of frost. I slipped my fingers around Marianne's watch and felt the steady pulse of a thing that had survived both of us. "Time doesn't lie," she used to say. "People try." I forced a story out of myself about a customer who welded his lawnmower to the wrong bracket and blamed the engine for his grass staying long. Tyler laughed, drove the conversation to plans, to legacy, to how good it felt to have everyone at the same table again. If you've ever tried to smile with a mouthful of broken glass, you know the ache behind my cheeks. Another buzz in my pocket. I didn't look. I couldn't afford to look. I swallowed and nodded and kept my answer short, like a man taking small sips from a glass he doesn't trust. Was I overreacting? Was I about to set fire to any hope of reconciliation because a stranger told me to? "Elena," Alyssa called lightly, without turning her head, "would you bring the custard later?" The housekeeper's "yes, ma'am" floated back like it had no weight, yet when she passed behind me, I smelled orange peel and dish soap and something else. Worry, if that has a scent. I pressed my palm flat against the tablecloth to stop my hand from shaking. I decided 3 things in that moment. I would not drink, I would not sign anything if anything appeared, and I would not, under any circumstances, tip my son off that I knew something was wrong. If the message was a trap, I wouldn't spring it by thrashing. If it was a warning, then my silence might be the only shield I had. The glass waited by my elbow like a dare. Tyler kept talking, Alyssa kept smiling, Elena kept orbiting the room, invisible to everyone but me. I breathed through my nose,
counted the tick-tick of the watch against my ribs, and tried to look like a man who was simply grateful to be back at his child's table. When the next vibration pressed against my leg, I told myself I would read it later. For now, I let the amber sit untouched and made a different kind of toast inside my head, to clear eyes, to a closed mouth, to whatever truth had followed me into that room and taken a seat.
I kept my smile in place and my hands off the amber. The room smelled like rosemary and money. Tyler's cologne faint under Alyssa's perfume, something sweet with a sharp edge, like citrus hiding steel. He kept reaching for my glass as if proximity could convince me. I slid it a thumb's width farther from my plate and picked up the water again. Maybe that looked rude. Maybe it looked like survival. "Dad," Tyler said, bright and careful, "we were talking about the future before you stepped out, how it might be time to simplify things for you." His fork hovered over the roast, but his eyes never left me. "Getting older isn't a crime," I said, which was true and completely beside the point. Alyssa's laugh landed softly. "We just care about you. We want your legacy protected without strangers getting in the way." She said strangers the way some people say termites. There's a register people use when they're selling you something you didn't ask for. I've heard it at car auctions, church fundraisers, weddings with open bars. It's all warmth at the front, pressure at the back. I felt it wrap around me like one of those lead aprons they put on your chest at the dentist. I touched Marianne's watch in my vest and counted 3 ticks. When I looked down, the amber caught a shard of chandelier light and threw it back. I rotated the glass, slow, like a mechanic checking for hairline cracks. At first I saw nothing but a mirror of the room. Then, when I tipped it just a bit more, I noticed it. Tiny specks clinging to the bottom like dust that didn't understand gravity. The kind of flecking you get when something dissolves poorly. Was I seeing it because I was afraid, or afraid because I finally saw it? "Try a sip," Alyssa said, voice low, almost tender. "It'll help you relax." "I'll save it for the toast," I answered, and my tongue felt like it had to push the words through wire. Elena passed behind me with a tray, the faint clink of glass like Morse code. When she set a fresh ramekin on the credenza, her hand trembled so slightly I might have missed it if the rest of me weren't tuned to her frequency. On her way out, she paused by the doorway, tugged the sleeve of her dress as if it had slipped. The motion pulled her wrist away from her body for a heartbeat. On the inside of her forearm, I saw a smear the color of tea. Maybe iodine, maybe something else you dab on a small cut. She noticed me noticing and lowered her eyes in a way that said, "Not here." My phone buzzed again. The sound was trapped in my pocket, but it seemed loud enough to rattle the silver. I coughed and patted my jacket like I was fishing for a mint. "Excuse me," I said, pushing back from the table. "This short collar is losing a negotiation with my neck." "Second door on the left," Alyssa said, too quickly. The hallway light hummed a thin electrical hum. I slipped into the powder room and locked the door. The message waited, spare and brutal. "Do not drink. Do not sign. They'll push papers tonight." I leaned against the sink and let the porcelain take my weight. Not metaphors, not warnings wrapped in riddle. Short sentences like a mechanic's work order. I checked the number, unknown. I searched the thread, nothing earlier, nothing to anchor it to a past favor or a prank. My reflection looked like a man who had aged 5 years in 5 minutes. What kind of father turns around and walks back into a room like that? The kind who doesn't want to leave his son alone with himself. When I returned, the dining table had evolved. A neat stack of cream-colored documents sat half-hidden by a linen napkin near Tyler's elbow. A pen lay on top at an angle that made it look casual, like it had landed there by accident.
I've spent my life around clipboards and service estimates. You can tell when paper wants a signature the way you can tell when a dog wants out. Everything points in the same direction. Dad, Tyler said lightly, we had our attorney put together a simple packet, just a comfort plan, durable financial proxy stuff. You know, if anything ever, God forbid, happened. He said God forbid with a smile. No rush tonight, I said, keeping my voice equal parts sand and sugar. I came to eat. Of course, purd comes first. Custard's coming. Elena appeared as if conjured, setting down 3 creme brulees, the tops glassy with burnished sugar. When she put mine in front of me, her fingers brushed the table a beat too long. She straightened, eyes level for once, and in that fraction of a second something passed between us. Recognition, yes, but also a plea that felt like a rope tossed over water. Then it was gone. She was steam and shadow again.
We made small talk. I took a spoon, broke the candy shell, watched the crack run across the surface like a fault line. Tyler slid the papers toward me as if we were all part of the same graceful choreography. Just so you can skim, he said. No pressure. I skimmed, the way you skim a road you know has black ice. The phrases were all the ones that show up in glossy brochures. Continuity, guidance, family stewardship. Then the harder words, authority, agent, exclusive control. A notary seal glimmered like a coin someone dropped in a fountain and left behind. Who drafted these? I asked. A friend, Alyssa said. Keeps it in the family. Friends bill by the hour, too, I said, and Tyler laughed a little too loudly. I set the packet down with the care I usually reserve for carburetors that snap if you look at them wrong. If I sign anything, I told him, Arthur's eyes touch it first. I didn't say Arthur Penn is the kind of attorney who reads the terms on a church bake sale. I didn't have to. Alyssa tilted her head the way a person does when they're deciding whether to push harder or switch lanes. We just want to avoid unpleasant surprises, she said. You've earned peace. Peace. In that moment, the word felt like a blanket they could pull over my face. I reached for my water again. The amber waited. Patient, unoffended. I rotated it 1/2 inch and saw the flecks wink up from the bottom like stars trying to hold their breath. My stomach turned. The smell, now that I let it in, had a chemical whisper under the oak. Not bad, not obvious, just wrong. What was I supposed to do? Make a scene? Throw the glass? Accuse my son over dessert? Or play it the way I've always played the long jobs at the shop? Slow, deliberate. No sudden moves until you know where the bolts are. Tell me about this house, I said to Alyssa. It's impressive. The compliment tasted like chalk. Her smile returned in full. She launched into square footage, crown molding, the quiet street, the smart systems that ran everything from the blinds to the sprinklers. While she talked, Tyler watched me. Not my face, my hands. He watched my hand not reach for the pen, not reach for the glass. His fingers started that old restless drum on the table. Index, middle, ring, pinky, like when he was 16 and lying about the dent in the bumper. Elena came in again, collected plates, stacked them with the kind of balance you only learn when you've carried other people's messes for decades. As she lifted mine, she whispered without moving her lips. Later. I barely heard it. I felt it. A breath on the air shaped around the missing syllables of a life-saving sentence. Dad, Tyler said, softer now, we can go over the details in the study. It's quieter there. After coffee, and after I call Arthur. You know me. I smiled like a man indulging his own old-fashioned habits. He forced his cheeks into something approximating patience. Sure, after coffee. I let the moment hang. Outside the tall windows, Brookfield's night pressed against the glass, neighbors' porch lights floating like distant ships. Marianne's watch beat steady against my heart. I didn't know who was texting me or how Elena knew what she knew, but I decided this. I would move like a man who has already survived. That means no panic. That means my signature stays in my pocket. That means the amber could sit there until the world ends and I still wouldn't put my mouth to it.
I set my spoon down, wiped my fingers with a napkin, and looked at my son. "Ty," I said, quietly, "we can talk about legacy all night, but the only legacy I recognize is the one you build with your own hands." His jaw tightened, his eyes flashed, his smile recovered. Somewhere, something in him understood the night was not going to go the way he'd storyboarded it. Elena came in again, empty tray hugged to her stomach, eyes steady, a lighthouse beam nobody else was looking for. I met her gaze for a half second and gave the smallest nod I've ever given in my life. We were at the edge of a plan I didn't fully understand, but I knew enough to sit still, to keep the pen capped, to let the evidence keep writing itself in the space between what they wanted and what I refused to give.
The next buzz came while Alyssa described crown molding like it was a moral achievement. I didn't look at the screen until I excused myself to stretch my back. In the hallway, under that humming light, I eased the phone out and read, "Kitchen. 5 minutes. Alone." 5 minutes passed like 5 years. I counted them against the slow heartbeat of Marianne's watch, then slipped through the swinging door the way a man steps into a garage he doesn't own. The scent in there was steam and orange peel and the metallic edge of a dishwasher mid-cycle. Elena stood at the sink, sleeves rolled, hands in the water, as if the room itself depended on the rhythm of her work. She didn't turn. "Do not drink," she said, barely moving her lips. "Do not sign." "I haven't," I answered, keeping my voice just above the sound of running water. "They put something in your whiskey." She finally glanced at me, eyes steady. "They will make you comfortable, then bring papers. The notary is already downstairs. He waits." It's a special terror to hear your suspicions spoken in somebody else's mouth. "How do you know?" "I am invisible," she said. "Invisible hears everything." She shut off the tap, wiped her hands. The towel trembled once and then was still. "They argue about money in front of me. They forget I speak English. I clean their desk. I see their emails. Sir, please." Her voice thinned and then strengthened again. "You cannot trust them tonight." A wave rose in my chest. Anger, grief, both wearing boots. "My son," I said, and the words felt like a key I couldn't make fit a lock. Elena stepped closer. "She owes men from Eastport Capital Group," she whispered. "They called here. They came by once. She, Alyssa, said they have a deadline. She told him to finish the transfer or the house goes." I stared at the industrial mixer on the counter like it could answer me. What kind of father was I if the first thing I felt was relief that my unease had a name? What kind of son puts his father's signature on a rescue raft and calls it love? "Can you show me," I asked, "anything that proves this?" She inhaled, nodded. 10 minutes. They think I am fetching coffee." Her eyes flicked to the hallway door. "We go now." We moved like conspirators in a story I wished were someone else's. The back stairs were narrow and carpeted, the kind of staircase you only use if your name isn't on the mortgage. At the top, the air shifted, cooler, full of furniture polish and the bland aftersmell of money. Elena led me to a study with heavy curtains and a desk that never saw a grease stain. She went straight to the right-hand drawer, slid it open, and lifted out a cream folder with quiet, practiced hands. Inside, the pages were arranged like a stage set. On top, durable financial proxy papers with Franklin Mercer in bold, my name looking like somebody had glued it where another man's used to be. Underneath, asset schedules outlining the Mercer Garage Group, 7 shops, tools, trucks, accounts, plus my house in Northbrook, my savings, my retirement. The word agent appeared in every paragraph, and each time it did, Tyler Mercer followed like a shadow. The notary's seal sat ready on a separate page, gold and official, and in that moment, obscene. She tapped the bottom right corner. "Here," she said, "there is a line they want you to initial, confirms you are lucid." They even wrote the word, lucid. There were emails, printed and highlighted, clipped together with a binder clip that felt like a hand at the back of my neck. Subject lines, timeline, signing, contingency. The last thread showed Alyssa arranging a private visit from a notary we trust with travel fee covered. In one message, Tyler wrote, "I'll keep him calm." In another, Alyssa replied, "Use the single malt. He won't suspect it. If he balks, we pivot to grief." The sentence dug into me like a hook.
Elena turned a second folder around. Bank transfers. A short string of payments to shell companies I didn't recognize, and one that I did. Eastport Capital Group. Each amount heavy enough to put a crack through sleep. At the bottom, a scribbled note in Alyssa's hand. Call R about sedation dosage. Ask for mild, so speech is fine. I felt my jaw lock so tight that the hinge clicked. "We cannot take this," Elena said, awareness cutting through her urgency. "They will check, but I made copies." She stepped to the bookshelf, slid a forgotten paperback free, and from behind the dusty spine she pulled a small black flash drive, no bigger than my thumb. "I saved the emails and scans. They leave computers open, phones unlocked. They talk like the music is louder than I am." I stared at the drive and thought of all the times women like her have kept engines running in houses they could never afford to stay in. "You risked everything." "Elena," I said carefully, trying the name in my mouth the way she had tried lucid in hers. "If they do not look at me," she said. "That is my protection and my shame." Footsteps sounded in the hall. Elena snapped the folder shut and slid it back, lifted a pen from the blotter, and placed it at a casual angle, as if she had only come in to dust. The footsteps paused, then moved away. I exhaled, and didn't realize until then that I'd been holding my breath. She slipped the flash drive into a folded dish towel and pressed it into my hands like it was nothing more than cotton. "Put in your pocket, with the watch," she said. I did. The drive nestled against Marianne's brass like a second pulse. 2 anchors, one to love, one to proof. On the way back down, Elena took the front stairs. We separated at the landing like strangers. She passed through the dining room door first, carrying a coffee pot as if I had kept her from her only task. I followed slower, letting the house absorb me again. Tyler looked up, eyebrows lifted in a question mark he tried to shape into concern. "All good?" he asked. "Back is stubborn," I said, sliding into my chair. The packet sat where he'd nudged it, pen atop like a gleaming threat. Alyssa refilled my water before I could reach for it. "We made coffee. Thought you'd want to be sharp for the reading." She smiled sweetly over the word sharp. I let my hand rest flat on the table. Under the linen, my fingers trembled once and then steadied. I told them as evenly as I could manage, "You were right. Big nights deserve to be handled carefully. I'm careful by trade." Tyler chuckled. "That you are," he tapped the stack. "No time like the present." I didn't answer him. I set the pen upright like a little flag and slid the papers half an inch away. "Arthur first. Tomorrow morning." He did the finger-drumming thing again. Alyssa's knee touched his under the table. I could tell by the way the rhythm died in his knuckles. "Of course," she said. "We're in no rush." Coffee Elena brought. When she set mine down, the saucer tilted and righted. A tiny ripple spread across the surface and vanished. Her eyes never met mine. That was how I knew we were still alive. She faded back through the doorway, and I felt the room tilt around a new center of gravity, the little black drive warming in my pocket against old brass. I looked at my son, his careful hair, his expensive watch, the boy I'd taught to gap a spark plug, now running a con inside his own father's name, and I felt something harden and something soften at the same time. The hard thing was resolve. The soft thing was the part of me that remembered him asleep on my chest in a Harborview apartment with a leaky window we couldn't afford to fix. Both truths lived in me, and neither canceled the other. We talked about nothing for a while: weather, a neighbor with a yappy dog, a fundraiser Alyssa had chaired. The notary never appeared, and that told me he was close enough to arrive at a nod. When Tyler circled back for the fourth time to how seamless tomorrow could be if we just laid the groundwork now, I stood. I should head to Northbrook. Early start. Payroll, inventory, you know how it is. He stood too quickly. His chair bumped the rug pad and caught. "We can ride upstairs, just to—" "Tomorrow," I repeated, and this time my voice carried steel I didn't plan. "Arthur reads first." He did the finger-drumming thing again. Alyssa's knee touched his under the table. I could tell by the way the rhythm died in his knuckles. "Of course," she said. "We're in no rush." We hugged in the foyer, that stiff hug men do when the words they need are all the wrong shape. Alyssa touched my arm. "Drive safe," she said, and it sounded like a warning to herself. Outside, Brookfield's night air felt like water after smoke. I walked to the Buick under a sky that had no interest in our small wars. When I started the engine, it hesitated, coughed once, then settled into the loyal rattle I knew by heart. I put the car in gear and rested my hand over my vest pocket, feeling old time and new evidence beat against each other, not in conflict, but in chorus. How many times had Elena been invisible to save somebody else's evening? Tonight, she used it to save my life. I drove toward the freeway, past manicured hedges and dark windows, already planning. Delay, document, call Arthur. And then, whatever came next.
Northbrook was quiet when I pulled in. Porch light throwing a yellow coin on the driveway, my mailbox leaning like an old man in a wind that wasn't there. Inside, the house had that late-night hum, the fridge cycling, the baseboard heater clicking, the small noises that tell you you're not the last living thing in a room. I set Marianne's pocket watch on the kitchen table and laid the flash drive beside it, two small anchors glinting under the cheap fixture I kept meaning to replace. I called Arthur Penn. He answered on the second ring with the voice of a man who sleeps with his glasses on the nightstand and a legal pad within reach. "Frank, everything all right?" "No," I said, "but it will be if we move fast." I told him about the dinner, the amber, the papers with my name buying somebody else's future, the way a notary had been parked somewhere close enough to smell our coffee. I kept my voice steady. The steadier I sounded, the less likely I was to feel the edges of it all. "Do not drink anything they pour," he said, as if that needed saying. "Do not sign. Forward me copies. We'll loop in the DA if the documents show intent." "I have more than copies." I looked at the flash drive as if it could hear me. "I have their planning in writing." "Then you have leverage," Arthur said, his voice sharpening. "And leverage is how you walk back into a room like this with your head up." After we hung up, I booted my old desktop in the back office. The screen took its time, the same stubborn delay my Buick gives me every cold morning. I slid the flash drive in and waited while the folders opened into subfolders, each one full of proof that my life had become a target someone could cost out. I copied everything to my hard drive, then printed the worst of it. The emails about dosage, the draft pages where Tyler Mercer shadowed agent, the notary request with travel fee covered. The printer thumped, paused, asked for more paper like even it wanted to be done with this night. I collated the stack, slid it into a battered file folder I'd used for payroll before computers swallowed handwritten ledgers. Old habit made me stand, walk to the kitchen, and tape an index card to the outside with a piece of blue painter's tape. 1, Proof A. I made 2 more copies, one for Arthur, one for a safe deposit box I hadn't used since Marianne died. If they burned one set, the others would live. You learn redundancy in a garage. You keep it for the rest of your life. At 1:07 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Another call came through 2 minutes later. Different number, same refusal from me. On the third, I answered, Mr. Mercer, friends of your son at Eastport Capital Group. He's late. We don't like late. The voice had the texture of ice under a thin layer of water, smooth until you step wrong. I said, if you harass me, you'll meet my attorney. If anything happens to me, the DA gets a package with your company's name printed a dozen times. A quiet laugh. We prefer resolution to mess. He has options. Perhaps you do as well. I have one option. It's staying alive. The line clicked dead. I set the phone down and felt my hands shake for the first time all night. Not from fear, at least not only fear. From anger. From the obscene ordinariness of it. They'd talked about sedatives next to charcuterie. They'd booked a notary like a dog walker. How do you answer people who make your existence a line item?
Wrong animal, I said, but close enough. You need anything? He said, voice low. I'm here. Thank you. 2 words I don't toss around. He nodded and returned to an alternator with the attention of a surgeon. Tyler arrived at 12:08, wearing the same expensive watch, the same smile that flattened when he saw the paperwork spread across my desk. He shut the door behind him and tried for casual. This is dramatic, Dad. What you tried to do to me last night was dramatic, I said. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need it to. Sit. He sat. He put his hands on his knees the way he did when he was a boy getting measured for school pants. For a heartbeat, the overlay of that small memory almost undid me. Almost. I slid the first page toward him, the email about dosage. He didn't touch it. I slid the second, the notary arrangement. He swallowed. I slid the third, the durable financial proxy draft with my name and his name braided in a way that made my skin crawl. I built this life with busted knuckles and nights on cement floors. You thought you'd steal it with a pen and a drink? It isn't like that, he said too fast. It was protection. You're not getting younger. Protection is calling your father and telling you're drowning, I said. Protection isn't drugging him and bringing in a notary you found on a group chat. He flinched. The truth, put plainly, has a way of stripping fancy language off a situation. He reached for the email, read, and went pale in a way I remembered from the time he broke the garage window with a bat he wasn't supposed to have. Alyssa handled the... He stopped. The what? I asked. The dosage? The travel fee? The script you were going to follow after I signed? His jaw tightened, then loosened. The edges of him started to fray. You don't understand, he said, but the conviction was gone. These people... Eastport, I said. They've already called me. His eyes snapped up. Fear sharpened them the way sorrow never had. They called you? And they'll call the DA next if you don't come clean, I said. I leaned back, let the chair creak. Tell me how deep you are. He stared at the papers like they might rearrange themselves into a different story. The drum of his fingers started, index, middle, ring, pinky, and then stopped as if he heard it for the first time. I took a bridge loan, then another. The market turned. I thought I could fix it before it mattered. His throat worked around the next sentence like it had bones in it. If I don't pay, they'll take the house. They'll take more than the house. And so you decided to take me? It wasn't... He pressed his fist to his mouth, then dropped it. The pretense broke. Words came out stripped. Dad, they will hurt me. It wasn't quite a plea. It wasn't quite a threat. It was worse. The sound of a man who had run out of rooms to stand in. What did you think they would do to me after you took everything? I asked quietly. Open me a tab at a diner and wish me luck? He looked at the floor. I thought you'd be comfortable. Alyssa said... He stopped again. A person who lives inside rationalizations runs out of air fast when you crack a window. I stood, walked past him to the window that looked out over Bay 2.
Marco lifted his chin from under a hood, a silent check-in. I lifted a palm. Fine, for now. Here's what happens next, I said, without turning. Arthur will contact the DA today. You will not step foot in my house, my shops, or my life without notice and a witness. You will tell Alyssa to lawyer up, and you will stop thinking of me as a solution. Dad! It landed somewhere between a child's call and an adult's warning. I turned. You used your mother's name in a plan to knock me out and empty my pockets. There's no dad in that sentence. He folded. I watched it happen. Not a dramatic collapse, just a slow deflation, like air leaving a tire you didn't know was punctured. I messed up, he said. I know that doesn't cover it. No, it doesn't. We stood in a silence that wasn't empty. It was full of everything we weren't going to be anymore. Finally, he reached for the doorknob and paused. They'll come after me, he said, without looking back. I know that. I do. And now you know I won't let you erase me to save yourself. He left without slamming the door. The latch clicked. I sat down, put my hands on the folder, and felt for Marianne's watch in my vest pocket, the familiar roundness finding my palm like it always had. What was I supposed to feel? Pride for setting a boundary? Or shame that it took this to make me set it? Maybe both. Maybe that's what being a father is after all these years, holding two truths without letting either one spill. Marco rapped once on the glass pane and lifted a paper from his pocket. A guy came by asking about you, said he was helping Tyler. Logo looked like Eastport. I didn't like his shoes. Add it to the file, I said. Arthur texted, DA on board, sit tight, do not engage further. For once, I obeyed a short sentence without arguing. I locked the evidence in the cabinet under the desk, pocketed one duplicate, and stood there, in my own shop, breathing the air of oil and dust and old radio songs, until my heart found a rhythm that didn't sound like running.
The morning after my talk with Tyler, my phone lit up with a banner from a local station. Brookfield investor under scrutiny for questionable proxy documents. The photo was Tyler in a tux from some charity thing, eyes shining the way they do when a camera takes the place of conscience. The article didn't say his name outright, but the breadcrumbs pointed straight to him. Recent purchases, a house on a tree-lined street, whispers about hard money out of Eastport Capital Group. I didn't leak it. News has a way of finding a crack when the pressure builds. I stared at the headline until the screen dimmed and set the phone face down next to Marianne's watch. Arthur called before the coffee finished. Subpoenas are drafted. DA's office wants everything. Today. I'll bring the satchel, I said, glancing at the leather bag already waiting by the door like it had slept lighter than I did. By 9, Tyler rang. He didn't say hello. What did you do? I did what men do when they're being erased. I told the truth to someone who can do something about it. You're destroying me. No, I said, steady. You did that. I'm just refusing to be the spare parts you sell along the way. He hung up. Silence settled over the kitchen, the kind you get after a thunderclap, the house still, your chest deciding whether to resume normal breathing. I locked the door, slid the satchel over my shoulder, and drove to the DA's office in Harborview, where old courthouses smell like furniture polish and paper that remembers other hands. A young assistant led me through a hallway to a conference room. Arthur was already there, sleeves pushed up, yellow tabs marching along the edges of our copies. The district attorney, a woman with silver hair pulled back neat and eyes that looked like they'd learned patience the hard way, shook my hand. She said, Mr. Mercer, we appreciate how organized you are. Years of inventory sheets, I told her. You learn the value of a clean label. I slid the flash drive across the table and the paper stack after it. The assistant logged, scanned, photographed. The DA read as she moved, lips pressing flat when she hit Alyssa's note about mild dosage, and eyebrows lifting at the notary's travel fee covered. She set a fingertip on the page that used Marianne's name. She said,
"I'm sorry," without looking up. I nodded once and found the watch chain with my thumb. They moved fast. A judge signed a warrant by early afternoon. Officers went to Brookfield while I sat in the side office answering questions I would have given freely to a stranger in a diner if they'd only asked the right way. By evening, Arthur texted me a time and a courtroom number. "Initial appearance tomorrow. Bring yourself and nothing more." Nothing more still meant the satchel. I kept it close, the way you keep a hand on a rail when the stairs are slick. The courthouse steps the next morning buzzed with microphones and black umbrellas. I kept my head down and the satchel strapped tight. Inside, a bailiff called the room to order. Tyler sat at the defense table, suit sharp, jaw slack. Alyssa was one chair back, face powdered into composure. She didn't look at me. The watch ticked in my vest like a second heart that refused to rush for anyone. The DA laid it out clean. Attempted fraud, conspiracy, attempted forgery, coercive tactics aimed at an elderly parent. She didn't dress it up, and she didn't need to. The exhibits glowed on a screen. Emails, schedules, the notary's text confirming the time. Every time the phrase durable financial proxy appeared next to Agent Tyler Mercer, a thin heat rose in my chest that had nothing to do with anger and everything to do with grief given a legal name. The defense went first for insult, then for injury. Mr. Mercer is confused. Mr. Mercer is grieving. Mr. Mercer misread a family plan. They tried to pull the word lucid out of the page and turn it into a knife. The judge watched their performance like a woman who had seen every version of it and knew exactly when it would sag. "Call Elena Ruiz," the DA said. Elena walked to the stand like a person carrying a tray you can't afford to drop. She raised her right hand and swore in with a voice steadier than the teacup tremble I'd seen in the dining room. "Miss Ruiz, how long did you work in the Grant Mercer household?" She said, 6 months. 3 days a week. She told them about the study, the papers, the emails left open like there wasn't a person in the room who could read them. She described the call from Eastport, how a man had come to the door asking if the paperwork was still on track. She talked about the saucepan left on a burner, the day Alyssa May's phone call with the word dosage in it while stirring a sauce, like sedatives and rosemary belonged in the same recipe. The defense tried to take her apart. "Isn't it true you were dismissed?"
I resigned, Elena said, chin up. I would not stay and be a witness to harm. They attacked her English. She answered in clean sentences. They asked if she was bitter. "I am tired," she said, "not bitter." The courtroom, which had been a whisper factory, got quiet. "Miss Ruiz," the DA said, softer, "why did you send Mr. Mercer messages that night?" "Because he looked at me," she said, "not like furniture." She glanced at me then, and I felt a sting behind my eyes I hadn't planned on. Then came the turn I didn't expect. Alyssa rose from her chair, whispering with her lawyer, then asked to address the court. The judge frowned, consulted, allowed it. Alyssa stood at the lectern with the posture of a woman who had practiced this in a mirror. "Your Honor," she said, "I am prepared to cooperate." Her lawyer produced a binder, bank records, private messages, transfers, setting it on the ledge like an altar offering. "I can provide context showing Tyler initiated and drove the plan I was wrong to follow." Tyler's head whipped toward her. "Are you—" His lawyer tugged his sleeve hard enough to leave a crease. The judge's gavel tapped once. The DA took the binder, leafed through, and did not smile. The room breathed in. I felt nothing rise to meet it. What do you do with a person who calls sedatives context? They called me near the end. I stood, swore, and told it straight. The text at dinner, The glass I didn't touch, the pen I put upright like a flag I refused to march under. How Elena brought me into a room where my name already belonged to someone else. How I drove home with a flash drive next to a watch my wife had given me, and how the weight of the two together kept me from drifting into the story they'd written for me. "Why are you here, Mr. Mercer?" the DA asked at the end. "Because my son confused inheritance with entitlement," I said, voice low, "and because dignity is not something you sign away for anyone." The judge set bail high. The DA filed additional counts. A trial date sketched itself on a calendar I didn't want to own. Months turned in courthouse light. Motions, continuances, more paper than my satchel had the spine for. I kept working. I changed 2 alternators myself one afternoon just to feel the weight of something I knew how to fix. When the trial finally came, the jury took a day longer than I thought they would, and an hour shorter than I feared. They filed in, faces unreadable, 100 small lives that had pressed pause for our mess. On the count of attempted fraud against a vulnerable adult, the 4-person read, "Guilty." On conspiracy, "Guilty." On attempted forgery, "Guilty." The words didn't land like a victory shout. They landed like a wrench set back on a bench, solid, unglamorous, right where it belongs. Tyler looked at me, mouth shaping a syllable I had no room left to carry. Alyssa kept her eyes forward, calculating the slope of her cooperation toward leniency. Elena sat 3 rows back, hands folded, small cross at her collarbone, steady as a star. Arthur touched my elbow, the pressure of a man reminding you you're still tethered to the floor. We walked out through a column of microphones. I said nothing. The watch ticked. The satchel was lighter than the day I brought it in. How are you supposed to feel when your child is convicted of trying to empty yourself from yourself? I didn't have a word for it yet. I only had the air on the courthouse steps, and the long walk down, and the surety that I had refused the wrong story at the right time.
Reporters shouted my name on the courthouse steps like it belonged to the story more than I did. I kept walking. The satchel was light now. Marion's watch ticked without hurry. Tyler's lawyer spoke into microphones. Alyssa disappeared through another door with people whose shoes didn't squeak. I drove home along a route I hadn't taken in years, past the high school where Tyler once pitched 3 innings and walked off grinning, past the laundromat where Marion and I used to read magazines while our towels circled the drum. Memory is a neighborhood you can only visit after dark. The days after looked ordinary from the outside. I opened the shop, signed invoices, ate soup out of a can. Inside, everything had shifted a few degrees. The paper ran stories that use words like scheme and coercion. Customers left coffees on the counter for the boss. A neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, the one who shakes her head at everyone's hedges, touched my sleeve at the market and said, "You did right." I nodded, because I had run out of positions between gratitude and ache. Arthur filed motions. The DA called twice to confirm a handoff of digital originals. Eastport never called again. The absence felt less like mercy and more like a ledger that had been balanced some other way. What do men like that do when a mark stops being profitable? Move on. Predators migrate, too. Marco showed up one afternoon with a small bundle of brass keys bound by blue tape. "Change the locks on your office and the side entrance," he said, setting them on the counter like a communion offering. I didn't ask, I just did it. "Thank you," I managed. He didn't make me say more. He adjusted the open sign, asked if I wanted lunch, and when I said no, he left a wrapped sandwich anyway.
Some kindnesses are designed to be discovered after the door closes. A week later, Elena knocked on my front door holding a tin the size of a steering wheel. "Polvorones," she said, half smiling. "Mexican shortbread, not fancy." She stepped inside like someone visiting a quiet chapel. Her eyes moved over the framed photos. Marion's hand on Tyler's shoulder the day he learned to ride a bike. The picture of me and Marion with a fish so small it barely counts. Elena traced the room with a gentle gaze that saw everything it needed to without making me feel inspected. "She was beautiful," she said. "She still is," I answered, and it wasn't a correction. We sat at my kitchen table. The watch lay between us like a small sun. Elena told me she'd found work with a family whose arguments were about soccer schedules and lost socks. "It is peaceful," she said, and the word landed like a seat I hadn't realized was empty. I thanked her again, stumbling, "You saved my life." She shook her head. "You saved it," she said. "I only pointed." When she left, I stood alone in the doorway holding leftover cookies and realized the house felt less hollow than it had the night I'd driven to Brookfield hoping for roast and reconciliation. Sometimes survival sounds like simple noises: the door catch, the kettle sigh, the mailbox closing with a small, faithful thud. The letter came on a Tuesday. Plain envelope, my name written like Tyler was still practicing the M in Mercer. I sat with it for an hour before I opened it, the way you sit with a hot engine to see if it cools on its own. His words were stiff at first, then sloppy when remorse outran his handwriting. "Dad, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I didn't think it would go that far. I thought I could control it. I am sorry." He wrote about the cell, cold, loud, a clock with no face. He wrote about Alyssa, how people become weather systems when they're scared. He wrote about Marion's name and how he'd used it like a spare key. "I see it now," he said, and I believed him for exactly the length of the sentence. I folded the letter, slid it into Marion's old Bible where she used to press flowers between psalms. Forgiveness, I decided, didn't mean forgetting the plan or the glass or the pen. Forgiveness meant carrying less weight on the walk to the mailbox. A few days later, I drove to the cemetery with lilies from a grocery store that keeps good flowers in winter. Frost clung to the grass like it wanted to stay. I brushed the headstone clean and sat on the little bench that pretends to be comfortable. "I kept your watch on," I told Marion, and if anyone had walked by, they would have heard a man speaking softly to the wind. "I didn't sign. I didn't drink." Was that the kind of update a husband gives years after? Maybe. Maybe it was enough to put words in the air where they could uncoil. On the way back, I stopped at the shop and found a toy car, red paint chipped, wheels bent, on the back shelf behind a box of carb cleaner. Tyler had carried it everywhere when he was 7, pushing it along my workbench while I adjusted timing belts. I set it on a high ledge above the punch clock. You don't throw away the piece of a story just 'cause the chapter hurt. Evenings found a new rhythm. I ate at the table instead of over the sink. I played the radio low enough to hear the house breathe. Sometimes I turned the watch over in my palm and listened to the tick like it was learning my pace instead of the other way around. One night, I walked the perimeter of my small yard, checking fence boards, tightening a hinge on the gate. It felt good to fix a thing that asked to be fixed. I got a postcard from Elena later that month, just a picture of a park and one sentence: "Peace holds." I tacked it beside the calendar in the office where the guys would see it and not ask. When Tyler was sentenced, the courtroom wasn't packed. No cameras, no editorials the next morning. The judge spoke efficiently. Time, restitution, conditions. He looked back once. I nodded. Not a benediction, not approval. A marker. We had come to the place where our two roads were no longer the same road. There's no word for that moment that doesn't sound like a poem trying too hard. I walked out the side door because the main door felt like a stage. On the drive home, Northbrook looked like itself. The same cracked sidewalk outside the bakery, the same kid on a scooter pretending the hill was steeper than it is, the same sky that forgives our roofs for being under it. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the Buick. In the quiet, I could hear the small tick of cooling metal. It matched the watch inside in a way that made me smile for the first time in longer than I want to measure. Was I supposed to feel triumphant? I didn't. I felt something steadier. I had not been erased. My name still fit in my mouth. My hands still knew how to turn a bolt. The house felt like a place where a life happens, not like a museum of what used to be. That night, before I turned off the lamp, I set the watch on the table and let the silence be the final sound. Survival didn't need a speech. It needed a man sitting in his own chair, in his own home, breathing. I told this whole thing like a mechanic lays out tools on a bench, one by one, wiped clean, put where you can see them. It took me a long time to learn that not everything is fixable, and the things that are fixable rarely fix themselves by shouting. That night at the table, when the glass shone and the pen waited, I thought the only choice was between exploding and disappearing. It turned out there was a third option: staying. Staying in my body, staying with the quiet, staying long enough to hear a stranger whisper "don't" and believe it. People ask what I feel for Tyler now, as if love is a switch that flips to off. It isn't. It's a light that finds different rooms. Some nights I sit with his letter again and trace the grooves his pen left, the way he'd trace a gasket to learn where the pressure escaped. I don't excuse what he did. I don't rewrite it. I just refuse to carry the weight of his choices like they're my own. If you're where I was, at a table that looks kind and feels wrong, listen to the small alarms inside you. You don't owe your life to the performance of family. You owe it to the person who has to live in your skin when everyone else goes home. Elena's postcard still hangs beside my calendar. Peace holds, it says, like a reminder that quiet is not empty. It's earned. I keep Marianne's watch wound and the office locks changed. I keep the toy car where I can see it without bleeding. The garage smells like oil and old songs, and the cash drawer still sticks on cold mornings. I count both as blessings. They mean I'm here. If you've been through something like this, tell me. The comments are open, and I'm listening. And if you haven't, but you recognize the way fear tries to wear other people's faces, keep your eyes clear. Keep your signature in your pocket. Keep your own time.